Okay, so starting off today's show, I wanted to talk a little bit of NBA basketball, and I know usually around this time of year we always talk football, but I actually decided to start off today's show with some NBA basketball. And on Tuesday night, the Denver Nuggets in Game 7, after they were down 3-1, defeat the Los Angeles Clippers by a final score of 104 to 189. And we have a lot to get into with this game. But before I say anything about the Los Angeles Clippers, I wanted to start off by giving a big shout out to the Denver Nuggets, Michael Malone, Jamal Murray, Nikola Jokic, and those guys, because they really do deserve to be in the conference finals against LeBron and the Lakers. They really deserve to win this series, and especially in Game 7, to me at least, they were clearly the better team. And it's funny because last year, Denver kind of came out of nowhere. All of a sudden, when the playoffs came around, they were the number 2 seed, and still, no one really took them that seriously. They played in a 7-game series against the San Antonio Spurs and ended up winning. And then they played another 7-game series against the Portland Trailblazers, and they came up short. And a lot of people believe the reason why they came up short was just simply because of the fact that Portland had better closers and better superstars. And that was kind of a little bit of a challenge to me for Jamal Murray and Nikola Jokic, including, what exactly could these guys really do here in this NBA bubble, and how exactly could this Denver Nuggets team do in this bubble? And they played really well. And let's not forget, they were down 3-1 to the Utah Jazz and came back to win that series. They're down 3-1 to the Clippers here and end up winning that series. And I think when you look at Denver, even though they were the number 3 seed in the Western Conference, before the playoffs started, if anyone would have told you that the Western Conference final would be Nuggets-Lakers, I don't think anyone would have believed you, just because of the Clippers and the star power they had and how, arrogant they were throughout the whole season and how confident they were that they were going to be making the NBA Finals. Or the conference finals, excuse me. But unfortunately for the Clippers, that did not happen, and the Nuggets are moving on. Let me give you some of these stat lines. Okay, how about Jamal Murray? In 45 minutes, 15 of 26 from the field, so pretty efficient. 6 of 13 from 3, pretty efficient. 4 of 4 from the line, and he had 8 rebounds. He had 4 rebounds and 5 assists. 40 points in total. Absolutely unreal performance. You look at Nikola Jokic, he played 40 minutes. He only had 16 points, but look at this number. 22 rebounds and 13 assists. What a performance by this guy, man. I got to be honest, I've been watching the NBA a long time. There are probably not many big men that I've seen ever that are better passers, just pure passers, than this guy Jokic. What Denver was able to do off the pick and roll was absolutely phenomenal in this game, and it was giving the Clipper fits. And Mike Malone really did outcoach Doc Rivers. We're going to get to Doc Rivers and the future of the Los Angeles Clippers here in a little bit. But yeah, just wanted to give a quick shout out to Denver, man. They played phenomenal. They played awesome basketball, and they do deserve a lot of credit for the way they played. Jokic and Murray especially, man. Jokic is phenomenal. He's a top 10 player in the league. And Murray is not, the way he's played in these playoffs, he's not too far behind. That dude is an absolute assassin. I've loved him since his college days at Kentucky, and he is just a baller. I was so impressed, and I hope they could give the Lakers a legitimate fight, because I know they think they can. And the fact that they were down 3-1 in this spot, in this series against the Clippers, it's just not any random team that's able to come back from 3-1. And the fact that they were able to do that twice, 2 series in a row, when in the history of the NBA, it's only happened 13 times, that is a phenomenal job, and the Denver Nuggets deserve a lot of credit. All right, let's move to the more fascinating story here, and that's the Los Angeles Clippers. And to be honest, I don't even know where to start. There are so many places you could possibly start. Let's start here. In the offseason, Kawhi Leonard decided to leave the Toronto Raptors after just winning an NBA championship and come to LA. He made the Clippers really give up all of their assets and their whole future to acquire a running mate in Paul George. And when you looked at the team around them with, Montrezl Harrell and Lou Williams and, Marcus Morris Sr., who they acquired midway through the season, Patrick Beverley, this Clipper team was built to win a championship and go far in the playoffs. And that was their expectations the whole way, ever since Kawhi really signed there. And the thing about Kawhi is this. We all know he is a 2-time finals MVP, and there's no one that's going to be able to take that away from him. But the bottom line is this. The Clippers choked in this series, And Kawhi was not very good at all, and he was a big reason why. And so was Paul George, but I wanted to start to talk about Kawhi a little bit. Once again, the guy is a 2-time Finals MVP. He's one of the best players in the league. But keep in mind, there were people who last year, after the Toronto Raptors ended up winning the NBA Finals, that said Kawhi has overtaken LeBron as the best player in the NBA. And I never saw that because even though he won a championship, we've never seen Kawhi. This was the first playoffs that we've seen Kawhi Leonard be the featured guy on a team that people expected to win a championship. As great as Toronto's run was last year, and the fact that they got over their playoff demons when no one expected them to, like, that was a phenomenal job. But the Toronto Raptors were not supposed to win the finals last year. If they would have lost to the Milwaukee Bucks in the Eastern Conference Final, I think the Raptor fan, your average Raptor fan, would have been more than happy with the way the season turned out. And I think when you look at this Clipper roster, at least on paper, it's just as good, if not better, than that Toronto Raptor team. But we know basketball games are not played on paper. And the Clippers were up 3-1 in the series. They looked pretty comfortable, but they got a little bit too comfortable. And it's funny. I remember watching the Clippers in the Mavericks series, especially in the game where Luka hit the game-winning buzzer beater. I remember saying to myself, the Clippers look a little vulnerable here. But at the same time, I kind of just shaked it off and said, they really weren't trying that hard throughout the regular season. They kind of went into this playoff series expecting to, wipe the floor with Dallas. And I never really thought for a second they were going to lose, especially when Kristaps Porzingis was out for the series. But at the same time, Denver is not Dallas. Denver is one of those teams where you cannot give them any chances or else they're really going to take advantage of it. On paper, they may not be the most talented team, but they are a tough, gritty team that likes to get the job done and believes in their unit. And the fact that they were down double digits in games 5, 6, and 7 of the series is just absurd. But Kawhi Leonard, listen to his numbers. In 44 minutes, 6 of 22 from the field, 2 of 7 from 3, 6 rebounds, 6 assists, 2 steals, a block, and 14 points. And he basically, the whole Clippers team scored 33 points in the second half. Denver scored 28 alone in the third quarter and 22 in the fourth. And it's funny, the Clippers were up by like 10, 12 points. I probably would say midway through the second quarter. And even as a guy that was watching this game, I didn't feel that confident that the Clippers were going to win. Throughout the from whistle to whistle, the Denver Nuggets were the better team. Even when the Clippers were winning and went on that little bit of a run in the first half, the way Jamal Murray rallied the Nuggets and said, "Get on my back," and played to keep the game at least at reach at halftime was incredible. The Nuggets were down 50. They were down 56 to 54 at half. So they were down 56 to 54 at half. They cut the lead all the way to 7, and then all of a sudden they're up by 7. And it was just an incredible job by Jamal Murray, Nikola Jokic, and company. So Kawhi was awful. There's no doubt about that. And I think a big reason why is because he had to do it all by himself. And it was the first time where that kind of pressure was put on him. And I think that's ultimately why we cannot say right now that Kawhi Leonard is the best player in basketball. Paul George. First of all, the Clippers gave up a lot to get this guy. And I even said it at the time. I was like, look, I guess if Kawhi could come, it's worth it. But the Clippers are giving up a lot of assets in this trade, including Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. And if you listen to this show, you guys know I'm a huge fan of SGA, and I think he's going to be a very good player in Oklahoma City for a very long time. But Paul George, 4 of 16 from the field, 2 of 11 from 3, 0 for 1 from the free throw line, 4 rebounds, 2 assists, 10 total points. And on that shot when he hit the backboard, I didn't even know what to say. That's when it really hit me. I was like, not only are the Denver Nuggets going to win this game, but the Denver Nuggets right now are far and away the better team. And it was over way before then, because that's the other crazy thing. The Nuggets were down by 15 plus points multiple times throughout this series, and they could have been eliminated in game 5 or 6 if they didn't come back. And the funny thing was that no one really saw those comebacks coming, and everyone was freaking out on Twitter, acting all surprised when Denver ended up, taking the comeback and getting the win. And in this game, it was kind of the opposite. Once Denver went up by like 10, Twitter knew midway through the third quarter that the game was going to be over. They knew the game was going to be a wrap and that the Clippers had no chance. And that's the bad part. A couple other things before we move on to the next segment is that number one, Doc Rivers deserves some criticism here. And so does Paul George for another reason. I'll stick with Paul George. After the game, this guy has the balls to say that internally the Clippers didn't think they were a championship contender. Come on. You know that's not true. Because if it was true, you wouldn't have rested your guys throughout the regular season. You wouldn't have built the team the way you did. And you wouldn't have given up all the assets in the world to get you. It was a tough night for the load management crowd because to win championships, you need that chemistry. And you not only do you need that star, but you need the ability to communicate with others and to, get your teammates involved. And none of the supporting role players for the Clippers besides Montrezl Harrell really was able to get the job done. I love Denver's chemistry. You love the Lakers' chemistry, obviously. The Celtics have some chemistry, and we don't even have to talk about the Heat's chemistry. So I'm not shocked at all that those were the four teams that end up in the bubble, that ended up in the conference finals. If you'd have told me before the bubble started that those would be the four teams, would I be a little surprised? Yeah, probably. But after watching more and more basketball in this bubble, these are probably, for me, the four best teams that deserve to be here. The other thing about the Clippers is Doc Rivers. And I think right now it's fair for us to question if Doc Rivers is a great coach. And I don't think he's going to be fired next year because they had a good season, and I know they choked, but I don't think it's fair to fire him. You have Kawhi Leonard and Paul George next year. They could opt out after. So if I'm the Clippers, I think you have no real choice but to try to run this thing back and try to win another championship one more time. But the reason why Doc Rivers has always been a very interesting coach to talk about is because, one, he's had a lot of stops. He blew a 3-1 lead in the playoffs in his first stop as a head coach in Orlando with the Magic. He then goes to Boston and wins a championship there with a great team, but it was a championship is a championship, and he got a lot of credit for that, and that was a great job by him. That was a great coaching job. But since that championship, let's be honest here, what has he really done? He's a good coach. I think there's no doubt about that. He's an above average, and he's a very good coach. He's a top 8 coach in the league at the minimum, maybe even higher. But at the same time, when you look at it, this is now the second time with just the Clippers alone, this guy has blown a 3-1 lead in the playoffs, and he did it in Orlando. So this is the third time he's ever done it, and no coach has ever done it more than once. Clearly, in games 5, 6, and 7, the Clippers really just didn't look prepared to play at all. And if I'm a Clipper fan, a lot of that blame, even though, Kawhi and Paul George were on the floor, that has to fall on your coach too. And their owner, Steve Ballmer, a guy that really did his best to try to turn this team around, making it the premier destination for many free agents throughout the league. And when you look at it, I don't really know where he goes from here because I think you once again have no choice. You have to run it back. But the Clippers may just be one of those teams that are maybe just cursed because they've never made a conference final ever. Everyone expected them to win it, and they couldn't get the job done. And it's funny because a lot of people have been talking about it now, and I think it's actually a legitimate argument to have. And it's, when you look at Kawhi Leonard, do you think he regrets coming to the Clippers? Because if he leaves at the end of next year, then the Clippers are in real big trouble because they couldn't get to the conference finals with Kawhi. Imagine what they would do without him. And Doc Rivers, next year, man, it could very well could be his last year. I don't think he's getting fired this year because in the regular season they exceeded, they matched expectations. But in the playoffs, man, you could kind of just tell something was always wrong with this team. Something was off, and I really didn't like how they looked at all. So congratulations to the Denver Nuggets. Once again, just an incredible effort. And if you're a Los Angeles Clipper fan, I don't know what you're thinking right now because your team just choked their first conference finals appearance ever away.